I'd like to talk briefly about what I have learned over the years from Andrew Chesterman, a fellow scholar in translation studies over many years, as it turns out. I think I began a doctoral program here in Tarragona in 2003, and Andrew was always part of that. So that's a good 20 years and more prior to that, I imagine. I believe he, I'm told he won't be writing any more papers about translation. That's okay. There's plenty of it there at the moment. And I moved to do this basically because of this citation here, where Andrew says some very insightful things about trust and translation and the translation profession. And that's cited a lot because trust has become a topic of great interest in recent years. And one of the papers I published this year criticizes that statement as if it were the worst thing in the world that one could say. And I think that's a very bad place to leave things. It's not the worst thing. It's worth discussing because it actually pinpoints uh, a very important feature of our field of inquiry. And that's why I discussed it and criticized it. But I don't think I was kind enough, and I want to be a little bit more respectful. Things I have learned from Andrew. Number one, listening. I have seen this is a photo of, I think a student has just presented what we call the minor dissertation. After 2 years, they have to do a draft of what they're going to do in their doctoral thesis. And Chris, Scott Tennant, much missed, and Andrew and I are sitting there pondering what to say about this student's presentations. But I've seen this, especially one session we had in Melbourne where we had doctoral students doing their presentation, and Andrew was sitting there listening to them so hard. I think his ears were hurting inside. Absolutely the effort to try to understand what this person is doing, where they want to go, how they can get there more elegantly, more efficiently, or with clearer concepts. But taking the time to listen and absorb and try to understand that person in front of you is something that I've seen in Andrew, and uh, and I admit I don't do it very well, or I don't do it enough, and I've learned to try to do it more. Okay, number one, I've learned to listen. Number two, I've learned from Andrew to pay attention to science. I mean, mainstream science of the past 2 centuries. From Andrew, I read Popper. Basic. What is 20th century science? What's it doing? And then in the early years of the doctoral program we had here, I recommended Dunbar's book there, or Chalmers' book, uh, just so students know what science is. You can accept it or reject it or do something else or argue the humanities doesn't need any of it. Um, but you got to know what it is, especially these days when we have some engaged cultural researchers who want nothing to do with that kind of science, which I would call empiricism. I would call it reflexive empiricism, the asking of questions and the testing of questions on the basis of data. And that's the one thing that we actually insisted on in our doctoral program. You've got to test your ideas on the basis of data. Okay. And that came from Andrew. Um, Andrew is not a slave to Popper, and he has his own ideas and other inputs that have come in later. It's a bit more sophisticated than that. But especially in translation studies, it's a very, very important thing to learn and to reproduce. Know what science is before you start criticizing it. That said, it's not as if we sat down and talked about science or Karl Popper all day. One of the early debates I had with Andrew online for some time was about tea bag instructions. Okay, so we could find the interest of translation in the everyday. Tea bag instructions, at the back in the French and the German was Finnish was different, etc. whether the yeah, German was ziehen. German was pulling the flavor of the tea out of the tea bag into the water, and then the Romance languages were infusing, uh, going from the tea bag. Anyway, okay, we would have these petty discussions about apparently petty issues, but also the ability to find the profound in the everyday is something I have learned from Andrew and shared with Andrew uh, with tea bags. I note his article on what I call translation solution types, or I think he calls them translation strategies or techniques. I'm not too sure. Um, you can see that he's done it in the analysis in an in-flight magazine. Okay, so he's just found there, oh, I wonder what translation solutions are. Pick it up and analyze the in-flight magazine. It's around us. Um, it might be an English thing as well. This intrigue in the everyday. I don't think Andrew follows cricket. I haven't, but John Milton I'll discuss cricket with a lot. But okay, we will discuss tea bags. Things I've learned from him, again, and this is the big one, is the value of concepts. That when people are arguing about things, someone can come in and give a few words with ideas that clarify, don't bring in truth, don't bring in consensus, but just clarify what we're talking about. One of the main ones, one of the most useful ones is this when people are discussing different kinds of universals. Levy called them tendencies. The features that translational language has more than other kinds of language. And Andrew will come in and say, well, you know what, you're talking about all very different kinds of things. And the proposal was, you've got S universals, where they concern the source text and the start text, and then T universals, where they're features of the translation going out. And then you get back and look at it and say, yes, actually, people are talking about quite different things. S universals would be relation between the source text and the translation, measuring that. And T universals would be relation between the translation and the parallel text or the general usage of language on the target side. Easy thing, but sorted out a whole lot of different problems. Andrew came in and said, oh, we're talking about translations, but suddenly people have started talking about translators. And his was the proposal to have translator studies. Let's focus on the human translator and let's reorganize the discipline around the human translator. I think it was a useful term. Another example, the retranslation hypothesis. These ideas have been with us since Goethe. They were formulated by Antoine Berman, but in Berman with a lot of other things and value judgments on top of it. Andrew comes in and says he gives the simplest formulation of the retranslation hypothesis. Later translations tend to be closer to the original than earlier ones. Thank you very much. Clarity, a hypothesis. In in the discussion of ethics, Andrew's proposal for a hieronymic oath is a beautiful paper in that sense because it takes a lot of the diffuse discussions and arranges them, I think, from memory, into four categories. And just that categorical thought makes things easier to talk about. Much as I might dislike categorical thought as such, if you think that these are watertight compartments, but they're not. But he can come in and say, oh, look, over there you're talking about that, the effect of the translation, and over there you're talking about the relation with the author, for example, and you two people are talking about two different things, so why are you arguing with each other? The other thing I like very much in that paper, it comes from Karl Popper, when I think Popper observes that different cultures have different ideas about what is the aim of a good life. The good will be different for each culture and for each person. It's very subjective. But there's a lot more agreement in our cultures and between us about what bad is and what suffering is. We know what suffering is. Suffering is shared more than ideas of the good. Bringing that across into translation ethics, Andrew formulated the idea of discursive suffering. When we work, our aim should be not to achieve an ideal solution. There is no ideal solution, or no one ideal solution. We should avoid discursive suffering. Good idea. I have doubts. I don't agree 100%, but it brings in this concept, which is uh, helpful in organizing the social discussion. In general, I have learned from him the importance of asking questions. For anything there, sit down and listen, try to understand what's going on, try to organize concepts, and then ask questions about where we go from here. And ask and then get data. And this is the basis of the empirical method. But asking questions would be the most important part that I've learned from Andrew. Rather than propose universal solutions, keep asking questions, keep that critical mind, keep being open. And then, as I said, empiricism as a testing of ideas. And all of those things I've learnt and I agree. Now, what's more interesting is where do I disagree? And there are a number of key points over the years that we've had just clear, open disagreements. One is technical. Andrew has a paper on different kinds of hypotheses. He has a category for interpretative hypotheses, which for me are models, are large-scale models. For example, if I want to see um, translators' activity as managing risks. Okay, for me, that's a model of what goes on. For Andrew, that's an interpretative hypothesis. Why do I make the distinction? Well, the model is valuable because it can help us see things, whereas a hypothesis should, for me, be falsifiable as far as possible. Andrew doesn't apply the idea of falsifiability as rigorously or as widely as I want to. Basic difference in terms and in approach. So that has to do with falsifiability, which is from Popper. The second is clarity, and this is more interesting perhaps. For Andrew, avoiding communicative suffering means being clear so people can understand what's going on and grasp things clearly. This is also the usefulness of concepts, of course. And I don't accept that, basically because I don't think language is transparent to the world. I think language influences the way we speak, and I think that the way we use language, that the rhetorics that we have, is having effects on the way we perceive the world, for good or for bad. So I'm not going to privilege just clarity. I want all the discursive devices that I can have. Okay. And this is a position that I take from deconstruction, from a critique of that Enlightenment proposition of clarity and transparency to the world. I would associate Andrew more with the Enlightenment position and that belief in the value of clarity, whereas I have a greater belief in the value and power of rhetoric, particularly in its deconstructionist avatars. That goes hand in hand with a commitment to truth, or what Andrew recently called in a debate we had online, truthiness, that some statements are closer and have more truth with them or a greater chance of being true. I have abandoned that notion, that search for absolute truth. I am happy enough with Andrew to have hypotheses and test them on data and get that data and correct the hypothesis and proceed that way empirically. But for me, that does not need to involve any kind of transcendental signified or ultimate truth, not even as a quality of the work we produce. Okay, we can travel along the same route, but I'm going slightly more on one side and Andrew slightly on the other. Andrew, I think, also has this was a debate we had with Itamar Evan-Zohar here in Tarragona. This idea that our cultures, our civilization, our societies are better, the more we can ask free questions and the more we can have public debate. Fine, this might be a Habermas thing as well. And that leads to an idea the of explaining the success of Western culture since the 18th century, of why it has spread out all over the world. And Andrew will argue that this is the reason. This clarity and this constant questioning and open public debate will lead to superior cultures. I don't share that. This is that's us having that debate there in Patagonia. I don't particularly share that. I think I am more aware of the negative effects of cultural hegemony. I am more guilty of what has been imposed around the world. I have a greater relation because of being Australian with the weight of the history of negative context with indigenous cultures. And I'm far more open, I think, to alternatives, to ideas of clarity and debate and antagonistic opposition. There are societies that work very well on the basis of consensus and of deep traditional knowledge, and I have a lot of respect for them. That difference also comes out in interesting ways. I mean, I will work with Bible translators, for example. Why? Because they know a hell of a lot about languages and cultures, no matter what you think about their deep faith. And I respect faith. I respect that. I won't argue with it. Let's argue. Let's talk about the languages and the cultures. Andrew doesn't go down that track. He doesn't want to speak with those people. His Enlightenment values are tend to be very non-religious. Okay, and on the other hand, Andrew will talk with some people in translation studies whom I recognize I can't influence, and I don't respect their opinions, and I will simply not argue with them. Andrew will be quite open to discussing with them and looking for points of consensus as much as they can be reached. So, yeah, there are social differences there in the people we speak with and the people we don't speak with. But the one thing I want to note here is that for 20 years or more, we have been speaking, and I've enjoyed those discussions very, very much. And I have learnt far more from them than I'm sure I have personally put into them. So this is, with thanks, a big thank you to Andrew for all that arguing over the years.